JavaScript arrays allow you to store multiple pieces of related data inside of a single variable. So in today's video, we're going to take a look at JavaScript arrays, how we can create them, and some of the methods that arrays have available. So what is a JavaScript array? Well, a JavaScript array is a built-in storage mechanism that allows you to store multiple pieces of related data inside of a single variable. And you can access these using indices. And if you ever watched my JavaScript string methods tutorial, linked up in the cards if you want to go and check it out, you remember that we talked about indices and how we can access individual characters inside of a string using these indices. Well, it's a very similar concept using arrays. It's just indices are individual items inside of arrays instead of individual characters like inside of strings. So let's go ahead and create our very first array. So the way that we're going to do this is I'm going to save the array inside of a variable. So let's go ahead and create our variable array, and we're going to set it equal to an empty array, and we can do that using these double square brackets. And inside of these double square brackets is where we're going to define all of our array items. So let's say we want to create an array with fruits. So we can say apple, and then we can say banana, and we can say peach. And if we save that and then console.log that, and if we inspect over here, open up our console, you can see we've got this array. And if you expand it open, you can see we've got apple, banana, and peach. And you can see that we have multiple of these inside of this same variable. And this indexes at 0, just like the JavaScript strings do. So if you wanted to access an individual item inside of that array, you would do it using the index. So let's say we want to log out that banana value. So all we have to do to get access to just the banana value is after the array inside of the console log, after the array, we're going to put our double square brackets, and then we're going to specify the index of where it's at. So remember, the index starts at 0, so the first value in that array is at index 0. So if we wanted to get access to that banana value, we would pass in the index of 1. And if we save that, you can see that we logged out banana to the console. Now every array has a property on it called length, and this length property does exactly as it sounds. It gives you the length of the array. So to access this length property, we're just going to access array.length. And if we save that, you can see that we get the length of the array logged out to the console here. And this length property is a property that is stored with the array, and it's updated anytime that the array itself is updated. So if we add a fourth element to this array, let's say pair, and if we save that, you can now see that we have a length of 4. As it was updated, it updated the value of the length property as well. Now we're getting ready to get started working with array methods, but before we do that, we need to understand the difference between a mutating method and a non-mutating method. So a mutating method is a method that is going to mutate or change the original array. And a non-mutating method is a method that is going to make a copy of that array and then mutate the copy of that array so that the original array is never even touched. And I'll explain which ones are mutating and which ones are non-mutating methods as we go through them. So let's go ahead and get started with our first method, the Array.push method. Now the Array.push method is a mutating method that pushes a new value onto the end of the array. So we can do Array.push, and then we can pass in the value or values that we want to push onto the end of the array. So let's say we wanted to add a new fruit, kiwi, to our array. And if we do that, let's go ahead and remove the .length here and just log out the array. And whenever we save that, you can see we now have an array with a length of 5, and it's got the kiwi pushed onto the very end of the array. And as I said, this is a mutating method, so it's going to change the original array. Now we also have the counterpart, the pop method, which is going to remove the last item on the array. So if we just remove this here and we change this to pop, and if we save that, it's going to remove the last item on that array. Now you may have noticed that we removed both pair and kiwi from the array whenever we did this. Why exactly did we remove both of them? Well, the fact is that we never actually pushed kiwi onto the array, because whenever we saved, JavaScript reevaluated this array variable back and initialized this back to its original state. So whenever we called the pop method, it's being called on this value right here, these 4 values right here, and pair is just happened to be the last one. If we wanted to push kiwi onto the array and then pop it off, we would have to specify that Array.push, and we could push kiwi back onto the array, and then we've got pair that is still on there because we originally initialized it to this, and then we pushed kiwi onto the end of the array, and then we immediately popped it back off. And as you may have noticed, pop is a mutating method that is going to mutate the original array. So the next method that we're going to take a look at today is another mutating method called shift. And the shift method, what it does is it removes the first element from the array. So let's go ahead and call the shift method. And if we save that, you can see that our first element here, the apple element, has been removed from the array. And we have an exact counterpart to this as well, another mutating method called unshift. And what this unshift method does is exactly the opposite of the shift method. It adds an element to the beginning of the array. So if we say kiwi, so if we say Array.unshift kiwi, you can see that we now have kiwi at the beginning. So whenever we initialize this, we're going to initialize it to this initial array. And then we are going to shift off this apple element. So now it just has these 3 elements in the array. Then we're going to call the Array.unshift method, which is going to add an element to the beginning of the array, which is this kiwi element. And then whenever we log it out, it's going to have kiwi at the beginning with the last 3 elements never changed. Now with the unshift method, and this applies to the push method as well, we can actually push or unshift multiple different items all at once. All we have to do is just comma separate them. So if we wanted to push another pair onto the array, and let's say we wanted to push orange onto the array as well, we can just comma separate them like this, and it's going to push all of those in that order onto that array. Now the next method that we're going to take a look at is our first non-mutating method, and this is the slice method. And the way that the slice method works is it's going to return to you a small portion of the array that you specified. So it's going to take in a start and an end index, and it's going to return to you that portion of the array. So let's go ahead and do this. We're first going to create a constant called slice, and we're going to save this slice inside of this slice variable. So we're going to say array.slice, and then we're going to pass in our indices. Now the start index is always going to be inclusive, meaning that you have to pass in the value, the first value that you want included into the array. So the first one we want is we're going to get these 2 right here. So we're going to pass in our index of 1. Now the second index, or the end index, is going to be exclusive, meaning if we want to get these 2 values here, we need to pass in the index of this so that we can get that second value here. So we're going to pass in index of 3. So whenever we save that, we're going to go ahead and console.log our slice. And if we save that, you can see we've got an array returned to us with these 2 values inside of it. And if we actually console.log the array variable and we save that, you can see the array variable is completely unchanged. And this is what a non-mutating method does. It does not change the original array, rather it returns a new array with the values that you've specified you want. Now the next method that we're going to take a look at is another mutating method, and this method is the all-encompassing method really for working with arrays. We can do anything from adding new elements anywhere in the array, to removing elements in the array, to replacing existing elements in the array. So let's go ahead and first get rid of all of this. And we are going to first replace banana here. We're going to completely delete it. We don't want to add anything else. We just want to completely delete it. So let's go ahead and say array.splice. And the first value that it wants is the starting index. So the starting index of what we want to start with. So we're going to pass in the index of 1. The next value it wants is the delete count. And if you don't want to delete anything, you can leave this completely empty. That's perfectly fine. But we're going to go ahead and delete one element from that array. And if we save that, we can now see that banana is now no longer inside of the array. Now, if we wanted to add another method inside of the array, maybe at index 1, but we didn't want to delete anything, we could just pass in 0. And we can actually add another value in here if we want as well. So we can say kiwi. And if we save that, now we've got a 5-long array that has kiwi at index 1. And we can also replace things. So if we wanted to replace banana with kiwi, all we'd have to do is say delete count of 1. And then we could pass in the value that we want to replace it with. Again, we can do kiwi. And if we save that, now banana has been completely replaced with kiwi. And this is the splice method. This is a very powerful array mutation tool that allows you to do just about anything that you want with the array. Now the next method is a very helpful tool in many cases, and this is the reverse method. And this does exactly as it sounds. It reverses the array. So we could say array.reverse. And if we call that and save that, you can see that we've reversed the array where peach is at the beginning, banana is still in the middle, of course, and apple is at the very end. And this is, again, a mutating method that does change the original array. Now, our next method is going to be another non-mutating method in the join method. And what the join method does is it takes all of the values inside of the array, converts them to strings, and then outputs one single string with them all combined together. So let me show you how it works. So we're going to call array.join, and then if we don't pass in a separator whatsoever, it's going to default to a comma. So that way everything is separated by a comma. Now we can also join them all together into one single non-separated value just by passing in a string with no value whatsoever, or we could pass in something like this where everything is separated by dashes as well. And this is how you join them all into a single string. Now our next method is another non-mutating method, and this method is the concat method. And what the concat method does is it takes two or more arrays and joins them both together. So we can take these two arrays. I created a second array here so that we can join these together, and we can call the concat method, and we can pass in our second array. And if we save that, you can see that we've got a new array with all 6 of these values joined into one value. And we can see that it is non-mutating if we say console.log after it, and we can say array. And if we save that, you can see that the original array is still intact and it has never been touched. The concat method returns a new array with all of the values joined together. Now the last two methods that we're going to take a look at are both non-mutating methods as well. And the first one that we're going to look at is the indexOf method. And what the indexOf method does is it takes in a string value and it's going to search through that array to see if that value is contained inside of that array. And if it does find that value inside of that array, it's going to return to you the index where it found that value. So let's go ahead and use the indexOf method, and we're going to search for peach here. So let's go ahead and pass in the string peach, and if we save that, it's going to return to us the index of where peach was found, and it's going to return that index of 2, and that's exactly where peach is found, is at index 2. Now the other one that we're going to take a look at is the includes method. And this method just checks to see if it is in the array. If the string is in the array, it's then going to return a true or a false to you. So let's say if we can find banana inside of the array. And if we do, it's going to return true. But if we don't find, let's say kiwi, it's going to return false. And that is going to be it for arrays and array methods. If you do have any questions, leave them down in the comments down below. I'll answer any questions that you have. If you did like the video, make sure you slap a like on it. Check out the full playlist, link is right next to me. Make sure you subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.